Okay, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the clean air session this afternoon. Everyone will be using the chat box for any questions or comments. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. And our first presenter is David Gay with the National Atmospheric Deposition Program. David, I will give you presenter privileges so that you can share your screen.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, I think everybody should be able to see my screen
Yes, we can.
and hear me. Good, good. Thank you, Karen, for the invitation, and April Hathcote. I appreciate you guys asking me to speak today. Let's get it out of the way. Again, my name's David Gay. I am the coordinator of the National Atmospheric Deposition Program based in Madison, Wisconsin. And hopefully many of you know about NADP, but what I want to talk today is completely new. Within the National Atmospheric Deposition Program, we have started a pilot study to actually not measure wet deposition, which is what we traditionally do, but to measure air allergen in the atmosphere, basically pollen monitoring network. It's just a pilot study. We're giving it a try to see how it works. And sort of two other instigators in this idea are Greg Weatherby with the USGS and Andy Johnson with the state of Maine. And I know there's interest in this topic within tribal communities, so that's my talk today. For those of you that are unaware, what is the National Atmospheric Deposition Program? We are what's called a cooperative research support project by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Basically, we are a monitoring cooperative that operates business side at the University of Wisconsin, but we're in reality at our core a USDA monitoring network. We spend about $3.1 million every year in direct support to measure primarily the wet deposition of pollutants. If you want to think about it the other way, how much pollution is flowing into the biosphere from the atmosphere within precipitation. We also measure the atmospheric concentration of certain pollutants and estimate dry deposition. And as of my last count, we probably have about 15 members within the tribal community at our various locations. We make measurements all over North America at about 350 different monitoring points within North America. We also make measurements in Hawaii, Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and we have a site in Asia, and we're about to start a site in Bermuda. And as of now, we have about 450,000 historical precipitation samples measuring that flow of pollution into biospheres in our databases. All of that data is available. We started in 1978. This is our 42nd year of operation. Many people know us as the Acid Rain Network. Here's a map of all of our locations. We're organized into 5 separate networks, and where you see a star, we have more than one network. And as you can see, in the Oklahoma area, we have quite a few sites that are being run within the state and in the bordering states. Many of you know us from our maps. We produce annual maps that show the flow, the flux of all different of our analytical components, pH, sulfur, nitrogen, and a few other things. And all of these maps are available online, and you can go to your particular location to see how much, on average, pollution is flowing into your tribal lands. But the different part about what we're doing here is many of you probably don't realize, but NADP is built upon a series of committees. Within the NADP, we have something called the Aeroallergen Monitoring Science Committee, and this committee's interest is in measuring life in the atmosphere, not physical chemical components, but life in the atmosphere. It's got that basic mission to investigate and push forward the routine monitoring of life in the atmosphere. Got started with soybean rust project. We did it in 2010 through 2012. I don't know how many of you are farmers, but there's a lot of dusts, or I should say, there's a lot of rusts that move around in the atmosphere, and these create lots of agricultural diseases, crop impacts, and those sorts of things. That's how it got started. We've done an initial study at the University of Maine with NADP samples and pollen in those samples. And then sometime in the last 3 or 4 years, we've gotten together with several different organizations that do this type of pollen monitoring, which basically occurs at the major hospitals across the U.S. It is run by the health professionals. And there's probably one of these traditional monitors in Oklahoma City, and I'm guessing there's probably one in Tulsa, but they're not very well spaced. They tend to be in the east, and they're all just in cities. There's not a whole lot of this type of monitoring going on. So anyway, we have a committee that wants to study life in the atmosphere, and we've decided to start a pilot project, and we've got it up and going. So why would we do this? What kind of life forms do you find in the atmosphere? Well, there's a lot of them that I've learned over the last few years. This particular project's talking about pollen, and pollen is traditionally broken into 3 different types: tree pollen, grass pollen, and weed pollen. And I've also learned that they come on at different times of the year. But in the atmosphere, there's also lots of bacteria. There's lots of viruses, as we all know. COVID. There's a lot of fungi. Many of you may have experience with mold and mold spores. There's a tremendous amount of mold in the atmosphere, particularly in the interior, inside environments. Lots of agricultural diseases, as I just mentioned, rusts, and a few thousand more. There's algae in the atmosphere, and then there's a lot of what the allergists call biological parts. So broken parts of insects floating around, and another group of bodies called trichomes, or hair-like growths, that are found on plants. Is basically just plant parts. And this group within NADP wants to know a little bit more about these concentrations and distributions across the U.S. It's our trial network. So our idea is something like this. We already have a network that captures the rainfall as it's falling down to the ground to do our basic chemical constituents. We thought, well, we ought to be able to use those same samples collected over North America to look for pollen in those samples. Pollen is solid in the atmosphere. As it rains in the atmosphere, solids gets washed out. And we have 350 locations approximately where we're capturing this precipitation. We ought to be able to use our samples to do pollen too. So that's how we got started in this thinking. Seem to be having trouble advancing my slides. But from this kind of thinking, this committee and this idea, this project was born. A pilot study for monitoring aeroallergens in the atmosphere. And we have 3 basic goals. And we actually measure pollen, genus, and species in our NTN samples. And we already know the answer to that is yes. We're getting lots of pollen in our precipitation samples. Second goal, can we actually accurately measure pollen genus to the genus, not to the species, with a new piece of equipment called the pollen sense. I'll explain a little bit more of that in just a second, and we already know the answer to that. That is, the answer to that is yes, we can do that. So this new instrument works very well. And how well do both the pollen counts from the traditional NADP sample and this new pollen sense instrument measure up or compare to the traditional ways of measuring pollen in the atmosphere, which is using something called a rotorod sampler and a Burkhardt sampler? We're still working on this, how well they compare to the traditional measurements. And I'll show you how those measurements work in just a second. But we definitely know that we're getting a lot of pollen in our traditional precipitation samples, and we know that this new instrument that we're testing out seems to work too. This is always important, at least to me. Why should we even do this? I think probably everyone on this call either has allergies to allergens in the atmosphere or knows somebody that does. Some quick statistics. Allergies, more specifically allergies to airborne pollen, affect at least 50 million Americans, so that's 1 out of 6 of us. It's the 6th leading cause of chronic disease in the US, and the number that I think is great. We spend somewhere around $18 billion a year dealing with allergy problems and medical implications. It also affects quite a number of children, as you probably all will, and in part drives asthma issues. So it's very important from a health standpoint. There's the obvious connection to climate change. The idea is that as the world warms and probably gets wetter, pollen season should last longer, and they expect to actually increase the amount of pollen in the atmosphere. So the thinking is, in a warmer world, pollen issues will get worse and hang around for longer time periods. And from what we have learned at NADP, that the monitoring pollen is ongoing. And some of you may be even familiar with like pollen forecasts that are made maybe on your web app or on the channel. See these numbers all the time, but nobody's really sure where all that information is coming from. It's just a modeling guess, or it's actually measurements. But we definitely know that the monitoring of pollen is not very widespread, limited spatially. It's very costly and time consuming. There's probably a lot better ways to do this kind of monitoring, which we're getting into with this particular project. A lot of the data that they're measuring isn't getting out into the world. We even have a tough time finding it, and they're untimely. Typically, the real world measurements just happen during the day. They only happen in weekdays. They don't happen on the weekends, and that information is not getting out to the wider public, so it can be useful. So, basic pollen measurements, again, made by the health professionals at about 90 locations in the US, use something called a rotorod sampler. I've been in the air quality business for about 35 years. I've never even seen one of these. I know about them, but I've never even seen one. Basically what it is, there's an electronic motor in this box with an arm that turns around in a circle, and when that arm spins quickly, these little rods here get spun around in the atmosphere, and they're sticky. Have some sort of adhesive on them or gel that captures solids that the rod runs into. Revolution rate gets converted back to a sampling rate, and they can then take this rod into a laboratory, put it under a microscope, and count the number of pollen grains on it. It's a traditional way of doing it, but it's not a very efficient way to do it, and it takes forever to get that kind of information. There's also something called a Burkhardt sample, which is basically the same general idea. This sampler gets oriented to face into the wind, air flows in, goes down into, and impacts all the pollen onto a slide, which is then, also has gel on it, and they take that slide into the laboratory and look at it and count by eye the number of pollen grains on it. Again, not very efficient, but it's worked well for the past 50 years. Our idea, the this new idea. So this is the traditional mode. Make the measurement with the rotor rod, stain it so they can see it. And somebody looks through a microscope down at that stain slide to count pollen. What we're doing is we're collecting a precipitation sample in the traditional NADP way, which has pollen in solution. We take that precipitation solution, pull it through a filter, take that filter, stain the filter in the same way, and have a human count it. That's how we're defining we can see pollen in precipitation in our samples. That's the old way of doing it. Also developing, looking at a new instrument called the pollen sense. It's fairly small. It's probably about 12, 14 inches on a side. And it does pollen counting in a very interesting way. First of all, there's a pump that's pulling air into the side of it, and that pump pushes air onto a sticky piece of tape. That sticky piece of tape is on a reel. Tape goes through and under that blast of air. The solids get stuck to the tape, and then that tape moves underneath a microscope, ITEC microscope, that looks at each individual body on the piece of tape, takes a picture of it, and it sends that image through the web back to a server, in this case in Utah, and compares each image of every solid in the atmosphere to a library of known pollen pictures. It says, this picture is very similar to this in our library, therefore we can identify it as a piece of pollen from a pine species, which is really pretty slick. Here is a picture of of the tape, essentially, with all these individual bodies on it. It identifies a single body, estimates its size with this little box on it, and then takes a picture of it, each individual particle, and sends it back and compares it to alder pollen, pictures of alder pollen, elm pollen, birch pollen, ash pollen. And when it sees a match, it says, okay, we've identified 1 grain of birch pollen at this particular point in time, this location. And it's a pretty slick instrument. Here's an example. There's a piece of pollen that it found at our site in Madison on a particular day, and this was in early April. This image goes back to the laboratory. It knows how big that piece of pollen is. It then comes back and says, okay, we've compared this image to every image we have in our library. We think with a 99.9% chance of being correct that it is pollen. I think it's Cupressaceae style, the genus, and almost right, elm pollen. And then it basically does that for the entire record, and it makes these images once every minute. And at least this company reports their information back to a phone app. You can see what the concentration of atmospheric pollen is at your particular site within 5 minutes. It's a pretty slick little instrument. Here is just a graph that I grabbed from our particular site. So Madison starting in April the 5th, running through the day, and you can see that this instrument was measuring huge levels of Cupressaceae pollen, pine pollen, and salix, which I think is mulberries. Not too good on the biological side, but you get the point. These are concentrations of pollen per cubic meter at a particular location, and these are averaged to the hour, but it's giving us this kind of information. It's just a wealth of information, and it seems to work. So what we're doing basically is pairing the pollen sense with our NTN sample, number of locations in Logan, Utah, Durham, North Carolina, and my office in Madison. There's the pollen sense. There's our NADP bucket There's the rotor rod, which we have the traditional method running at each of these sites. And we're also doing a high volume sample of the same. And so basically where all this going is, if all this works, if we can say that the pollen sense is working accurately, or that we can say the NADP traditional method is giving us a good indication of how much pollen's out in the atmosphere, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The idea is that we will move forward and build a national network of pollen concentrations, either in precipitation or in the atmosphere, over and out through our traditional networks. And hopefully, at the end of all this, we will have pollen monitoring network that is national in scale, that anybody and everybody can join with us. The idea is to release all this data back to the world so scientists and policy people can make use of it for scientific studies or policy decision, and start looking for monitoring partners, as we have done in our traditional method. And so that's a spiel of what we're up to here. I'd say we're halfway through our pollen sense trial period. The pollen sense instrument seems to be working very well. And the data that I am seeing, outside of a few issues I have with some of the basic mechanics of the instrument, seems to be working pretty well, and it seems to be lining up pretty well with the traditional methods of NTN. So I'm going to stop sharing. Go back to Karen to see if there's any questions from anyone out there.
Thank you so much.
To answer them.
Our next presenter is Brandon Belvis. Brandon, I pass presenter privileges to you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Brandon Belvis. I work with some local governmental subdivisions on the eastern side of the Navajo Nation. I'm their community and economic development advisor with one particular subunit, which they refer to as chapters. It's called Ojo Encino chapter. And I also help out with a larger group of chapters referred to as the Tri-Chapter Council. So let me go ahead and pop up the presentation here. And here's our intro slide. So I don't have
Brandon,
a picture.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Do you want to change it over to your display settings? Right now we're seeing your like presenter mode.
I gotcha. Okay.
Sorry. You can go back to where you were, Brandon, and then just at the top where it says display settings, you just have to change that.
Oh, okay. I tell you what, I'll just go ahead and pop up our other presentation here real quick. And going to go ahead and share this one. Oh, can everybody go ahead and can you see that now?
Yes.
Okay, sounds good then. I'll just go ahead through with it like this. So the Tri-Chapter region, it sits in northwest New Mexico. So it's about kind of between Four Corners, where the four states come together, and Albuquerque. So it's about maybe 2 hours, hour and a half northwest of Albuquerque, New Mexico. There's some imagery that I'm just sharing here right now of the tri-chapter region. At the bottom, you can see Cabazon Peaks. That's at the southern extent in an area called Torreon Star Lake. And up towards the top are some shots of Counselor Chapter. This area is pretty much high desert areas. And you can see also we have lots and lots of dirt roads, which I'm sure many of you can relate to. So recently, within the last probably about 8 years or so, we've seen increased oil and gas development in the northern portions of the tri-chapter area in Counselor. This pretty much was driven by horizontal drilling, which accessed shale formations about 5,000 to 6,000 feet underneath the northern areas of the tri-chapter in Counselor. So as a result, there's been a lot of interest in air quality monitoring. There's fairly lack of data that's relevant to our region. So here in the red boxes, you can see the tri-chapter region kind of roughly sketched out in northwest New Mexico. And up to the north, you can see different FEM stations. There's also an FEM station that's in a national park referred to as Chaco Canyon. And then down in Albuquerque, there's other FEM level type stations. However, within that region itself, there's not too much actionable data that we have that's real time or publicly accessible. So as a result, there's been a lot of interest by people in the area and others to try to go ahead and start to understand that more. Additionally, environmental data such as weather, we don't have local stations, but there's a lot of local variability in weather patterns, and that's important for other reasons, including agriculture and also those roads, trying to keep them maintained. So currently what we're doing is we're trying to go ahead and start a real-time monitoring network across the region using off-the-shelf components. So nothing that really requires us to actually have to do a large amount of programming or development, things of that sort, and also does not require large amounts of staffing to upkeep the equipment. A lot of FEM style equipment does require a lot of upkeep. We're trying to keep that to a minimum because of the lack of resources to be able to hire folks and keep them on so that way they can continue to maintain that equipment. So there has been collection of data within the region. Most of this will be in that northern portion called Counselor Chapter. Down at the bottom, you can see the picture of a dirt road and some of the dust that gets generated by the heavy oil and gas traffic that ends up passing through there. So last year, towards the start of the pandemic, we took some air qual equipment that we have, PM sensors, and set them up, and also set up a VOC sensor outdoors just for a couple of months to try to get a feel for the area itself. We have had limited long-term real-time data collection. And what was interesting was we found every once in a while just events, anomalies that would occur. So on the top left-hand side here with the VOC data, with the air qual equipment, we noticed, background rates that were certainly less than 1 part per million for VOC, generally speaking. And then one evening, it just jumped up to 12.5 and just slowly came down through the evening there. After looking at that, could not understand where that would have come from, any other sources. The only thing that we thought is there might have been some sort of release from an oil and gas site approximately 1,000 foot from this site where the data was being taken. That indicated to us the need for real-time actionable data, which can give us indications of events as they occur. So that way we can either identify the source or be able to get FEM recognizable analysis or data collection by people either through SUMA canisters or other things such as that, so we can dispatch those resources at that time. And then you can see on the right-hand side some of the PM data that was collected. Here we can see a lot of times where we end up getting higher amounts that were being found. One of the biggest hits that we've had in our area is forest fires in the region. We do suspect, of course, that oil and gas development augments this, but between forest fires and then also the large amount of wood fuel burning that we have in the region for heating fuel, those two seem to be the largest drivers of some of the PM in the area. So as a result, being able to collect that data is also helpful as well too on trying to bring down our average PM levels, at least through wood fire burning, and trying to detect trash burning. So I'll go into that a little bit more. There's also been FLIR video that's been taken out in the area. This might be a little more related back to VOC, but some of the sites are just, they're remote, so they're not commonly checked often. So it's not uncommon for them to be just leaking large amounts of VOC out into the air. And there's been a few videos which shows that as well too from those FLIR cameras. So being able to have actionable data that's real time, and also, as was noted by the previous presenter, accessible to the public is very important. So here we go. These are the main things that we're trying to make sure that we accomplish as we go forward with the network. Real-time data, reduction in workload, making sure that this is not requiring somebody who's full-time actively engaging with the equipment, that for the most part it can be automated. And then also making sure that that region is being covered adequately with enough sensors to give us locally and hyper-locally relevant data. So this area right here probably encompasses almost 500,000 acres, maybe a little bit less. So just to give you kind of a rough scale. And then also we want to make sure that we have a quality assurance plans in order to make sure that the data is useful as possible. We don't expect purple air monitors to necessarily always meet an FEM standard, but if we have systems in place that can allow us to be able to show that we've been taking care of our sensors and keeping them up to par, it can help make them much more effective and useful. And a lot of this would be used on the local level, partially for policy discussions, but also to make sure that the public's informed. For example, we've had a lot of fires in the region, which has made the air quality very bad at certain points. And interestingly enough, it can cycle depending on where the fire is and wind, where it could be decent during the day, but then midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, it can get somewhat hazardous for certain populations. So a lot of people keep their windows open at night because it's a desert and it gets really cool. In that situation, that could possibly affect certain populations. So it might be a good night, for example, for folks to keep their window closed. So if we can get that kind of actionable information out to people, it can help. So here, right now, the name that we're calling it is the Tri-Chapter Environmental Monitoring Program. So, we have that mission of giving that real-time data that's actionable and useful for the local area. Ultimately, this data will be integrated into an online data portal for people to access online. Eventually also to be able to have some kind of app for phones so people can look up information, and then also be able to send out automated alerts. And we can structure that in different ways as well too. Right now, we're being very slow and methodical on putting the sensors out. We're taking our time because of the environment that we're in. We don't always have access to electricity or internet, just depending on the locations. And also the sun can be pretty brutal up in our area. UV ratings are fairly high, so, and the heat also. So we're trying to work through some of those processes, make sure that the equipment's tested on a small scale before full deployment. So here's some of the equipment that we currently have and that we're starting to put out there. We have the purple air monitors that we're starting to put out. You can see that sort of there in the middle. There we co-located some of the sensors at our main chapter house, which is Ojo Encino. That would be the hub for this program. And then those sensors have been deployed now in some other locations throughout the tri-chapter after we collected enough data. And then that little chime sound you just heard was actually our Tempest weather station. We have 4 of those stations. We've set 3 of them up now, 1 at each chapter, and they collect real-time data as well too. So which includes UV. That little chime you heard was actually lightning activity. Rain, it uses a haptic sensor for that, and then it collects a variety of other meteorological data. So right now we do have 1 of those running in each of the chapters, collecting real-time weather data. And then on the left-hand side, you'll see under night sky, that's an important cultural resource that we like to protect, but also has health and ecological impacts as well too. A Canadian company named Unihedron has been selling these night sky light pollution monitoring equipment now for, I believe, almost 2 decades. So we purchased 4 of these units. They're data logging, so we can actually set them up and let them go and then collect the data later. We also can stream that data online via FTP and then integrate that into a data portal or somewhere else. And then you can see also we can do it vehicle mount. So here I hacked a mount onto the side of my car and went ahead and did some drive-by light pollution monitoring in the area. So the top photo is actually Albuquerque, and then the bottom photo is the tri-chapter region, actually not too far from Chaco Canyon. And there you can see where it gets real dark, it's a darker green, and then where it gets a much lighter, it's yellow and then red. So we can do stationary setups where we plan to, but then also we can do these types of surveys as well to augment the data. So this can be real time, and this also can be archived data that we set up that folks can have access to. And then another sensor that we're experimenting with is from Zenect. They actually, I think it's the company that makes air quality eggs. We didn't opt to use those. We opted instead for Purple Air, but their Zenect sensors were relatively easy and they're relatively rugged. So we're using soil moisture and soil temperature sensors eventually for full deployment. And that ideally will help with the ranchers in the area. And also we've had pipes, water mains that have bursted because of freezing in the soil. There's been some swings in temperatures out in the region. So as a result, being able to keep eye on that, it's also useful for public infrastructure purposes. So this is kind of our next steps that we have going on. We're supposed to have the quality assurance project plans done by the end of this month. I'm running a little bit behind on that one, but we're getting close on those, doing it for the Purple Air, the Unihedron sensors, the Zenect sensors for soil data, and also for the weather stations that we've currently used, which is the Tempest. Hopefully by the end of October, we want to have 4 locations with the full suite, which is PM, weather, soil, and night sky. 2 of the locations will be real time, so you'll be able to go on and see that. Of course, it only matters for about 2 weeks out of the month because you have the moon the other part of the month. So, but at least we can have that data. And then the public data portal should be open by October, end of October, and that'll be just at least the basic portal. Eventually, we'll integrate it with some other data too. So, and then also we're working on our self-contained units, which don't require it to be hooked up to a household. So we can just deploy them anywhere. They're self-contained with solar and batteries. I have one in my backyard right now that we've been messing with, but it includes all these data sensors and it would be contained. Right now we're using PVC pipes, 4-inch pipes to contain the units. So we're just working on that, and that should be available by the end of the year. And then additional data types, that was very exciting from Mr. Gray's presentation. Pollen was identified as one of our top ones, and pollen sense was identified as the probable sensor that we would probably go forward with here. We'll love to talk to you more about that because the pollen situation definitely has effects on folks in our region for sure. And getting that locally relevant data is difficult. City of Albuquerque has a person that looks at the microscope and then does it the old-fashioned way, but that pollen sense monitor just seems to be a little bit more user-friendly and meets the mission statements that we have. Additionally, we're going to get noise sensors deployed, and then we'll start looking at water data as well too with our arroyos, but that'll be later on. The pollen, traffic, and noise is going to be our next major push through in 2022 for the most part. And eventually we'll have 8 sites up and going to try to give us that hyper-local data and try to make sure that we're integrating with other programs and projects. So trying to get that data out there, that's the tough part. Sometimes it's tough to actually get access to these data sets, and especially locally relevant data sets. It can be tricky. So, but for the most part, like I said, we're lucky we're in an era now where we have access to a lot of off-the-shelf equipment, and they all utilize back-end systems with APIs. So that way we can go ahead and integrate that into data portals. Right now I'm using a combination of Power BI and Power Automate, which are Microsoft programs, to integrate with those back-end sources and then create front-end presentations of the data. But of course, right now we don't have the portal up, but hopefully by October. But we're just taking it slow, trying to take it methodically. But it's kind of cool. It's already been helpful. It's helped identify some trash burning situations, which we were able to correct at a local level just by going out and chatting with folks. And when they were able to visually see on the charts the kind of impact they were having on the community, they changed what they were doing and disposed of the trash in a different way, using regular trash systems. And then on top of that, the weather data it's been really cool being able to get that local data now, because we've probably had more lightning activity this year than in previous years, and also it seems like it's been a bit of a wetter year. So anyhow, hopefully that gave you kind of just a basic summary of what we've been up to, what we're hoping to be up to, and be happy to answer questions and chat if there's anything we can help with. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Brandon. We appreciate it. If you want to check your chat box and see if you have any questions or anything, I'll look here real quick. I did have a request for your PowerPoint, so if you don't mind sharing that, if you want to send it to me, I can distribute it.
Absolutely.
I don't see any other questions at this time, but you guys can always put your questions in a little bit later during our next presenter. Thank you, Brandon. We appreciate it. And we'll move on to our next presenter. Our next presenter is Jeanette McConnell, and she is with the National Science Foundation. I am sending you presenter privileges, Jeanette.
Great. Thank you, Karen.
Sure.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and share a little bit about the work that I'm doing. And I'm actually with the National Science Foundation Center for Aerosol Impacts on Chemistry of the Environment. We have a super long name. We call ourselves CASE. But I have a video to share with you today instead of giving a presentation, because I have a colleague who couldn't make it today. And so I wanted to be able to share both of the work that we've done together, because it's really been a collaborative effort between the two of us and our two organizations. She's from the Climate Science Alliance. And so I'm going to just share this video with you and we'll watch that. And then I'll be around to add anything that I want to at the end, and also answer any questions if anybody has any. Seems there hasn't been any so far. Okay. So hopefully y'all can see my screen, and
Yes, we can see it.
Hope that the sound works too.
Greetings, everyone, and thank you to the conveners of this virtual workshop.
You might turn up the volume just a little bit, Jeanette.
Co-presenter, Dr. Jeanette McConnell from the NSF Center for
That's great.
Aerosol Impacts on Chemistry of the Environment, a space to connect with you all. I hope everyone is doing okay. My name is Alex Warnicki, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Climate Science Alliance, and I'm excited to present our collaborative efforts building educational resources for communities at the interface of aerosols and climate change. Now, before I begin, Jeanette and I would like to start in the good way and acknowledge the Indigenous nations on whose traditional territories we work and reside, the Kumeyaay, Luiseño, Cupeño, and Cahuilla people. We honor the continued presence and resilience of all Indigenous communities and nations today, and thank those that we work with for your friendship and your goodwill in our efforts to collaborate. Now, as we continue to adapt to our digital world, I'm really excited to start this discussion today, and then I'm going to pass the virtual mic, as it were, to my co-presenter, Jeanette, to keep the party going. So a little bit about the Climate Science Alliance. For those of you who might be unfamiliar with our work, we are a network of leaders, scientists, managers, and community groups across the Southwest. In 2014, we came together because there was a number of scientists and natural resource entities working to address significant climate impacts in the Southwest, but those people aren't always able to connect, and more importantly, the science and management decisions were not really reaching the communities most affected by those impacts. So fast forward to today, we have over 400 partnering organizations under our umbrella, really working towards this mission of formulating strategies and solutions to safeguard our human and natural communities against the threat of climate change. Now, the power of the Climate Science Alliance lies in our ability to focus our efforts on boundary-spanning projects and share our skills, expertise, and knowledge in order to bridge the gap between research and application in the community. We have three primary tenets to our organization to this mission: building resilience or science-focused partnerships, building capacity or training and convening practitioners across the space, and most importantly, building community, where we develop programs that allow us to bring our community along with us. Now, throughout all of our projects, we really put our model in action. We work at the intersection of these pillars right here in the center. We translate, we support, and we disseminate climate science and adaptation projects in our region and beyond. Now, we definitely cannot do this work alone. So we partner with several prominent organizations to make sure that we have updated and relevant science, and that we can work together to get it to the community members and stakeholders across the space. In 2019, we connected with scientists at the NSF Center for Aerosol Impacts on Chemistry of the Environment, or CASE, to help translate their expansive body of research on how aerosols are impacting our global health, climate, and vice versa. And then we integrated it into our K through 12 education program known as Climate Kids, which we're going to be talking about today. Now, Climate Kids is a series of community-based collaborative projects all throughout the US. Here in San Diego, where I'm residing, we have Climate Kids up in Washington, we have Climate Kids in Puerto Rico, Nevada. They're all over the place, which is amazing. And these projects provide youth education on climate change through science activities, storytelling, and art. Each Climate Kids project brings together local artists, scientists, educators, storytellers to really engage students of all backgrounds and inspire them to become environmental stewards. Ultimately, with this program, we really encourage curiosity about the natural world while providing youth the tools necessary to make educated decisions about how to protect our planet both now and in the future. Just to give you a kind of rundown of how the program works, we focus on the science behind climate change and emphasize that all Climate Kids as scientists have three main jobs. The first being figuring out what the problem is, second, finding solutions to the problem, and third, telling the story. We use a nationally tested framework for communicating about climate change, using metaphors such as carbon dioxide acting like a heat trapping blanket around the earth. We find that that's a bit more attainable for students. We focus on local impacts in places that are in our own backyard, depending on whichever backyard with the students that we're working with are familiar with. We keep everything local. So for example, here in San Diego, we don't necessarily talk about polar bears and ice caps melting because most of the students here have never seen a polar bear unless they went to the San Diego Zoo. we'd focus more on things like Mediterranean coastal sage scrub or rocky intertidal ecosystems. So some of the current topics covered in our Climate Kids curriculum are climate change in oceans, climate change in food systems, carnivores, pollinators, connectivity, and of course, what we're all here to talk about in this summit, air or atmospheric chemistry aerosols. Most importantly, our Climate Kids program and modules are solutions-based. So we tie all of the science to solutions. An example of this is in this 10 things I can do to help poster you see on the bottom of this slide. Just giving the students actions that they can take to really make a difference. To give you a bit more details about the components of Climate Kids, I'm going to walk through our 3 focus areas more broadly: the science, storytelling, and art. So we use the science, storytelling, and art to really teach about climate change in a way that is empowering and not scary. It can be a big, scary topic, but we don't want to scare kids. We want to make sure that they know that there are things that they can do. We have kids participate in hands-on science opportunities to really learn about climate change in their region. It just depends on what the program is. These programs teach them about plants, animals, ecosystems, air, affected by the impacts of climate change, with compelling questions about how humans and animals will both adapt and respond, or are responding to these changes now. We really focus on things that they can do to slow climate change down and protect the places and the things that they love. And this is things that are actually attainable for K through 12 students. So things like saving water, eating their veggies, planting pollinator gardens, those types of things. We also like to give kids a chance to really express what they learned by creating art that they can share with others. Our art component is run by local artists. They come into the classrooms or help us build modules that have climate-inspired art projects made out of maybe reusable materials or materials that students have easily accessible. We also use storytelling to teach kids about caring for the planet in ways that are more straightforward, more relatable, again, not scary. Prominently, we link Western science together with traditional storytellers, traditional stories and books that reflect different cultures and traditions. This is a huge part of one of our programs, our Climate Kids tribal program. Now, prior to the pandemic, these modules were made available really only through our Traveling Trunks program, which has all the components. Our Traveling Trunks have all the components educators need, materials, resources, PowerPoints to teach these topics. And we still have those available. If you're here in San Diego, make sure to email me and I can get you connected with that information. But now that we're all remote, and also because I'm assuming attendees to this conference are really from all over, I really want to use this opportunity to highlight one of our new offerings called Climate Kids Connects. Now, Climate Kids Connects is an online education resource portal. It's really overflowing with resources to support youth and educators and the community at large. So essentially, we took all of that content that we've created over the past since 2014, and we worked to digitize it. We have interactive videos, additional resources featuring guided climate science activities, storytelling, art. It's available in both English and Spanish. We have core curriculum trainings for teachers, PowerPoints, all the things you guys need in order to teach this in the community. So it's really exciting. This is actually, I think, one of the silver linings of the pandemic is that we had the space, right, to create this resource for educators and really build capacity for what we're doing. And so I wanted to walk you guys through a couple of pieces of the interface just so you get an idea of what it looks like, and then I'll show you guys a video example, and then I'll pass it over to Jeanette so she can talk more specifically about the aerosol curriculum. So this is what it looks like. You can find this at www.climatekids.org. That's the Climate Kids website. And then if you want to get to Climate Kids Connects, you just .org/connects, or you can just click it here on your computer, and you'll get into the Climate Kids interface. Once you're there, there's lots of different topics to choose from. Remember what I said earlier, Climate 101, climate change in oceans, climate change in carnivores. And then you can get into each of these sections specifically. And then as you can see on this slide, it's divided into those different pillars, right? So we have the hands-on science, that's where you'll find all those resources, art activities. We have really great art activities that we tried to, as I mentioned before, make them so they're accessible to students, no matter where they are, what they might have available, and do it like kitchen science, right? Really great. And then storytelling, where we have some of our storytellers read a lot of our climate books, our cultural facing books. And then we have additional resources. So if you want to dive deeper with your students or your community, there are resources for you to do that and to really expand that learning. So this is what it looks like once you click into one of those modules or one of those sections. There are all sorts of different resources. So you'll have a small description about what the resource of the lesson is, and you can just click in. It gives you what type of activity, maybe it's a video, maybe it's a PDF, and about estimated how long. And the reason we created it like this is because our Climate Kids program serves all sorts of students from all different backgrounds, maybe formal education, informal education. And so we wanted to make sure it was kind of a choose your own adventure style. You could pull the resources that you really needed for your students. And this is what one of those resources looks like. Once you click in the video, this can't scroll right now, but the video would be a little bit lower here. And so with that, I wanted to show you guys an example from one of the videos that was created for this interface. This is focusing specifically on the atmospheric chemistry module, and it's how to make a cloud in a bottle. So with that, I'll let Jeanette take it away.
Hi, my name is Jeanette with the NSF Center for Aerosol Impacts on Chemistry of the Environment. Now, we are a bunch of scientists who do chemistry to study how and why aerosols are so important to the climate and environment on our planet. But what's an aerosol? So an aerosol is any bit of stuff, like a solid or a liquid that gets suspended in the air. It can be things like ash from a volcano or a fire, dust, pollution, even sea spray, and salt could be bits of skin, right? Anything that becomes suspended in the air is an aerosol. And these aerosols are incredibly important for many different parts of our climate, but one of them that is really interesting is its ability to make clouds. So at the center of every single cloud, we have aerosols. And there are a few other things that we need to make a cloud. Actually, 3 things that we need to make a cloud. The first being aerosols, right? The second is water or water vapor, right? Water as a gas, right? And that water, what happens in the clouds is it condenses onto or attaches to the aerosols. And we need a third thing to make those clouds form, and that is a change in pressure or a lowering of the pressure, right? So way up in the atmosphere, the air pressure is much lower, and this low pressure helps with this water condensation onto the aerosols, right? So we need 3 things to make a cloud. We need aerosols, we need water, and we need a reduction in pressure. And we can get all of those things happening inside a bottle. Okay, now we're ready to make a cloud happen inside this bottle. So again, we learned we need 3 things to make a cloud. We need first aerosols. Now, there are aerosols everywhere. They are all around us all the time, suspended in the air. Just think of any time you've seen a sunbeam come through a window and you see little dust particles. Those are aerosols. So there are definitely aerosols already inside this bottle. The other thing we need is water, right? You can see there's a little bit of water in the bottom of this bottle. Perfect. And the last thing we need is that change in pressure. And we're going to make that happen using this bike pump. So what I've got is a little stopper attached to the end of my bike pump. I'll go ahead and put it into my bottle and pump it up. Now what this does is it creates very high pressure on the inside of the bottle. And if I release the top, we will get a sudden low pressure change happening inside the bottle. And we get a cloud. So this is exactly what happens up in the atmosphere every day. We get water and aerosols and different pressures coming together to make the clouds that we depend on for shade, for rain, and for snow. For more videos, visit our website or check out our YouTube channel and keep learning all about aerosols.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that fun interactive activity. So before I pass the mic to Dr. McConnell, I just wanted to say that there's also lots of other fun learning tools on the interface, things you can print out for your students. It might be Climate Kids Bingo or Climate Kids Scavenger Hunt, just to really engage them at this intersection. A lot of materials, both bilingual, so we hope that this will be helpful in your Climate Kids educational endeavors. And with that, I will pass the mic to Jeanette to cover the work that CASE is doing and some additional opportunities for you and your students.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jeanette, and I'm very excited to be here with you today. And I am here with the NSF Center for Aerosol Impacts on Chemistry of the Environment. We also just call ourselves CASE. And CASE is a research center that is comprised of nearly 100 scientists who all work together under the direction of Professor Kimberly Prather, who is a distinguished chair in atmospheric chemistry at the University of San Diego, California. And in this center, everyone who works there, we're all dedicated to understanding the impact of atmospheric aerosols on the chemistry of our environment and how it's impacting our climate. And as a part of this huge goal of understanding more and more about aerosols, we are also committed to bringing this knowledge outward. And so outreach and education is a huge part of what we do at CASE. And I want to just highlight a few of the ways that you all can get involved with us. And if you're interested in any of these materials, you can reach out to me. My contact information will be at the end of this presentation, or you can go to our website, which is case@ucsd.edu. And CASE is just like it looks on the screen, CAICE. So the first thing that I want to highlight for all of you is the opportunities that we have available for K-12 students to get involved and learn more about both aerosols and climate science and atmospheric chemistry. So we have teamed up with the Climate Science Alliance, who I am co-presenting with today, and I'm very thankful for the opportunity to do that, is by teaming up with them, we've created traveling trunks, which have hands-on science materials and activities and learning opportunities for students to use to learn more about aerosols and atmospheric chemistry. I've taken to calling our traveling trunk the briefcase because it does take a lot of the science that we do at CASE and put it into a more accessible format that's more fun for students. In addition to these in-person sort of hands-on trunks that can be used, we also have many virtual opportunities, which is especially important right now. And so there are many online videos available about CASE research. We are available on the Climate Kids Connects website that I'm sure Alex discussed, the Climate Science Alliance offers. And we also have live virtual sessions of the materials in this briefcase that can be done in a remote format that are offered as well. And those are put on by either myself or a graduate student who will sit with your students and do some interactive experiments with them using materials that most people can find in their home or in a classroom. So we have these two really great opportunities for you to connect with our educational resources, whether you can do so using the trunk and the materials hands-on in person, or if you want to do a more sort of virtual format. both of those are available to you. The other thing that I want to highlight that we have available to slightly older K to 12 students, right, more like high school students, is a particular program, the CLEAR program, and that's collaborative learning through environmental and aerosol research. And in this program, students, so high school students, are teamed up with a graduate student mentor from CASE, and they do a research project together about aerosols. And so this can be done using either an aerosol particle counter, or this previous year we used the Purple Air quality monitors, which also measure the amount of aerosols in the air. And so these students, they team up with a graduate student, they come up with the project that they want to do with these sensors or instruments that they have, that we give them access to. So it's real scientific instrumentation, and they work with a practicing scientist to go all the way through from idea generation into putting together an academic poster, and then presenting that poster to all of us at CASE, so we can hear more about the research that that student did. And in addition to the scientific research and poster part of this program, there is also an art component. So we can make sure that as we build up the next generation of scientists, they understand the importance of communicating science in a way that is not just academic. There is more to how we communicate about science, right? And so in this program, students were tasked with creating an artwork that was inspired by their project. And so several of the artworks are shown on the screen here. There are so many more, and they were just so incredible. You can go have a look at more of them on our website as well if you're interested. But you can see the submissions included poetry, digital art, painting, drawings. There was spoken word. And so this program really gives high school students an opportunity to do both scientific research and science communication through art. So if you or anyone you know is interested in this program, please share with them. We are always looking to bring on new students and new teachers to this program. So those are the two ways that your kindergarten through 12th grade students can sort of get involved with CASE, with our research and our educational outreach. We have additional resources for undergraduates that I also wanted to talk about briefly, where during the summertime, CASE offers a summer undergraduate research program and a science communication fellowship. So in this program, students, undergraduates, come to one of the laboratories for CASE, and they work in our labs with a graduate student and faculty mentor guiding their project. They become a part of CASE, they become a part of our team and contribute to our research. Many contribute to publications and learn the skills that they're going to need to be successful in graduate school. That's what the research program is. The Science Communication Fellowship is we bring in those students who are interested in science, but not necessarily the research side of things. And they come and interact with our team, with these other undergraduate researchers, to become the conduit for sharing CASE information with a wider audience. So we give them the skills and the opportunities to take in progress research that's happening and practice communicating that research in many different formats, right? It could be via a blog, or it can be via art, or some other imaginative idea that the students come up with. We are open to them taking this project on and really giving it their voice. So these are two things that we offer to undergraduates during the summertime, and they're both really incredible opportunities for undergrads to get more involved directly with academic research and see if this is where they want to go, see if this is going to graduate school and continuing on in research is the path that's right for them. So that is all I have to share with you today about CASE and our educational and outreach opportunities around atmospheric chemistry and aerosol science. So if you are interested in any of this, please give me, send me a note, check out our website. We are always looking for collaborations and to share our materials and resources with different communities. So thank you again for the opportunity to be here today with you all. And I will hopefully talk to you soon.
On behalf of the Climate Science Alliance and CASE, Dr. Jeanette McConnell and myself, thank you so much for listening to this presentation. If you have any additional questions about the resources provided in this video, please feel free to reach out. Both of our emails are here on the slide. In addition, the websites for our respective organizations and how you can connect with us on social media. We hope you found this video helpful and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.
Okay, well, that is our video together. And if you have any questions, please let me know, or you want to reach out. I'll put my email in the chat box. It's easier than on a slide. And the other thing I want to mention is I saw that Brandon had mentioned using the purple airs a little bit, and that is the sensor that we use with these high school projects. And it's a sensor that we have incorporated into the scientific work that we do at CASE, as well as a really great, like rugged, easy to install air quality monitor. And they also, what I love about the purple air is how publicly accessible all of the data from them is. And that's what also made the projects possible with the students, because even if they didn't have a sensor, or there weren't very many sensors like near them, you can use data from anywhere. And so the students were able to do projects that really looked at diverse geographical areas because of the publicly available data that's associated with purple air. But with that, I will finish up and hand it back to Karen. And thank you all so much for being here and for the opportunity to present.
Thank you, Jeanette. If you want to check your chat box just to make sure you don't have any questions in yours. I don't see any in mine. I had a couple of comments that I sent to you. So if Brandon and David want to check their chat boxes real quick and make sure we haven't missed anybody's questions. And also, if you have a question after the fact, you can send it to me and I'll forward it on. So Brandon, David, did you see any questions in your chat box?
I had a couple that I've answered.
Okay.
And no, I don't think there's anything left that I need to answer in the chat.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, if anyone would like the presentations that we had today, a copy of them, if it's okay with our presenters, I will share those. You guys can just email me. May take me a day or two to get to it, but I will try to get to everyone. And thank you, David, Brandon, and Jeanette. We really appreciate you. We had great presentations today, really good information. And with that, I think we'll end this session. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Be sure and join us again at 3 o'clock for the water session. So I hope to see everyone then, and everyone have a good afternoon. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
You.
Thanks.